been particularly excited about this panel since we sort of conceived of it in the office in terms of being able to engage with and pick the brains of retiring legislators to get their perspective on not only their time in the legislature itself, the institution, our politics generally, maybe how things have changed over the years that they have been in the legislature. And so we have a tremendous group of thoughtful legislators who really, I think, sort of span quite a bit of geography here. And so we're lucky, I think, to get a number of perspectives. So starting immediately to my left, we have Representative Rod Hamilton from Southwest Minnesota. We've got Representative Jim Dabney from Minneapolis. We've got Senator Julie Rosen from the Fairmont area, and Senator Susan Kent from just up the road in Woodbury. So we have rural, suburban, metro, Republican, Democrat, all thoughtful, all smart, all engaging, all have done tremendous work during their time in the legislature, and we're going to get to hear a little bit about some of that. And so there's a mic there, microphone on the table. And so I think I just wanted to start by asking, if you think back into the haze of time and the when you were all fresh-faced and energetic newbies, what was it initially? And maybe say the year that you were first elected to office. What was it initially that made you want to run for the legislature? And we can start just with Representative Hamilton there. And that mic should be on, I think.
Well, that was me when I first ran. And look at me now. I was physically running, now I'm in a wheelchair. This is what the legislature does. So that says it all. That says it all. But, so the question was?
What made you first want to run?
What made me first want to run? Well, I tell you, Speaker Steve Swigum at the time got my name from somewhere and asked me if I wanted to run. He invited my wife and I up to the Capitol and said, "Do you want to run?" And I said, "No, I don't." I didn't want to run at that time, but he did convince me to run. And I've always said, if you're not liking the way things are going, you can either complain about it or you can get involved. And we decided to get involved. And we sat down as a family, Lene and I, and we have two kids. But our son was in 6th grade, our daughter was in 4th grade. We sat them down as a family and said, "What do you think?" And my son was president of 6th grade student council. And he said, "Go for it, Dad, this will help further my career." I was involved with the pork producers and Farm Bureau at the time, and I served on the school board. And again, I just wanted to get involved. I love rural Minnesota. I love the area that I've been fortunate enough to represent. And like everybody else, it sounds kind of like a cliche, but you wanted to make a difference, right? And so we decided to tackle it and run for office.
Good afternoon, everyone. And Bradley, thank you for the invitation. I'm a Minneapolis guy, and I'm proud of that. But as I look back on my 22 years, first elected in 2000 in the Minnesota House, some of the work that I'm proudest of is work that I did with the coalition. So it's a sweet piece for me to be able to do. I think there's two pieces that come to mind for me. One is I've always been interested in politics and current events. So that current, my mother would say that when I was a kid, the day the Newsweek magazine came, I got home from school and I would sit on the couch and basically read it cover to cover, because I was just interested in politics and current events. And then that got intertwined with being on a trajectory that I didn't really realize I was on. I was active in my neighborhood group, and the rural legislators will always tell you what counties they represent. The urban legislators will tell you what neighborhoods they represent. So we can fight about whether it's equivalent, but you get the idea. So I was involved in neighborhood work. I was obviously involved in community level politics. And then I was a teacher, and I was very involved in union work and in somewhat the broader union movement. And so when that interest in politics and current events and the leadership opportunities that I had the opportunity to take advantage of in those three different spheres kind of came together, at about the same time that the legislator who was is now my predecessor decided to retire. And so it really was kind of those two currents in my life.
Very good. Well, thank you so much for this opportunity. Some of my favorite people are here, and I really appreciate this chance to be in this panel with these folks that I admire so much up here. And just to clarify, I think Rod and I are kind of deep role, actually.
Yeah,
right. And I did not have a political bone in my body, Jim. I was so far from politics. But I was very happy staying home with my kids. I'm a trained agronomist, 4-year degree from Colorado State. Born and raised in Denver, living in a small town in southern Minnesota. Cheap-free labor in the community. Just kind of getting active, got active in the political scene a little bit locally. Dick Day comes by, and there's an open seat, and I'm like, we're looking for a candidate. He goes, no, I want you. I'm like, no, I've got 3 little kids at home, 2.5 hours away to the Capitol. There's no way. My husband travels all the time. And he goes, no, I want you to think about it. So you think about it, I'll come back and take you out to eat in a couple weeks. So we sat down as a family, and there was tears because they were high school, middle school, and grade school. And their mom, who had been home, decides to take this big leap of faith. And Dick, God bless him, he's like, campaign's really easy. Don't worry about it. And I ran like hell, and I needed of it. And that's the story. And I think if there was one single topic that got me interested at that time, it was property taxes, which is so far, that's like off the radar for me. But no, it's been an honor to serve these last 20 years.
Thank you. Thanks, Bradley, and it really is great to be with you guys. When I saw the list, I was like, okay, this is going to be a good conversation. And thank you all for being here. You guys could not pick a better time, I don't think, to hang out in Red Wing for a few days. This is really lovely. So I'm actually the most junior member of this panel. I ran exactly 10 years ago, and it was during the redistricting window. And so, much like we've just been through, it's been flashbacks for me, because in 2012, the maps came out late, and it was a pretty big shakeup in my area, and there was nobody running for Senate, and technically the Republican seat was an open seat because he had gotten redistricted and had to move, which was another story. And but there was nobody running on the TFL side, and someone who I had worked with in local schools and advocating for our schools said, you should run for office. And I was like, you should get your head examined. And then when this happened, she came back up to me. She says, no, seriously, you really need to think about it. And I was like, oh my gosh, And so one thing led to another. That I always tell the story. That was March 12th. March 17th, she and I sat down over salads and mini Diet Cokes because everybody else in the place was drinking green beer. And I made the decision that day. And then at the end of March, I was endorsed, and a few months later, I was selected to the Minnesota Senate. So it was a whirlwind journey. I knew no matter what, however, at any step in that process, I knew it was going to be a chance to meet some amazing people and learn an awful lot. And that has been the case for 10 years now, and it continues to be. Like I said, I was very involved in our local schools. Education was a driving issue for me all the way through, because I just feel so strongly that we just have to give all our kids the best possible start, and education is so important in that, and has continued to be. And I've learned a lot about a whole bunch of other stuff too, and so it's been an incredible journey, and looking forward to the conversation. And I'm going to give a quick shout out if I can. My husband, Chris, and he's going to kill me. He doesn't usually come with me to anything. I know people bring their spouse a lot, but my husband just recently retired from his job, and he's sitting over there, and he's been a wonderful support, and I'm so glad to have him here with me today. And my LA Diana is sitting next to him, so man, she lives near me actually, so this has worked out well. Thank you.
All right, so your next question, why don't you just hang on to the mic and then we'll just kind of shoot it back this way. You're going to have to speak closely to the mic for the folks in Comfort Plus back there. One of the questions that I like to ask new legislators, like I give them about a month, and then if I'm meeting with them, one of the questions that I ask, and I kind of use it as a BS barometer almost, is I ask, so, you've been here a month and, gosh, there's all sorts of things going on. What has been the biggest surprise about coming to the legislature? And so I want you to think back, after you made that decision, after you got elected, and you first went to the legislature, what was for you the biggest surprise about the work, the interactions, whatever it was about being a member of the legislature?
That's a great question, and I really remember being asked that question by a number of people. And one of the things that I said pretty consistently was, and I took this as reassuring, was that there weren't a ton of surprises. I felt like, as somebody sort of like Jim, I'd been very interested in government and politics, and so I felt like I sort of understood the ultimate, how it worked, and I was reassured that there were not just a ton of surprises. I was amazed at the level of detail that I didn't fully appreciate. Once you get in there and you see how the process works, just in terms of the mechanics of it. But I did not, and I have felt, and that's been a thing for me, transparency, making sure that we are representing the people and the work that we're doing fairly and as openly as we possibly can. I really was not super surprised by anything, but I had a lot to learn.
That's very good. So, just to finish that last conversation too, which I forgot to tell you that I told my children, and I think this is really important, Bradley, is that figure out somehow to give back to your community, and that is why I decided to run. You have to do something for your community, whether it's picking up trash in the ditch or whatever, do something. But I believe the biggest surprise for me, I didn't know what I didn't know going there that first time. I was so new. But the amount of information coming at you all the time was incredible. And you could walk from here to the restroom and have 10 different conversations about 10 different items. And they
Yeah, sorry about that.
Yeah. Stop following me to the bathroom. That's that one time. That's okay. And so that was interesting. So in retirement, it's been a little interesting to slow that pace down. You don't have to be genned up all the time with and making decisions. Relax a little bit. But anyway, that's another conversation about retirement.
I think for me, and this continues to be the case, is how separate the worlds are between the House and the Senate. When I was first elected, the Senate seat in my district was also open. And so, brand new senator, she and I got along great, brand new me in the House, and I thought we'd be talking every day and we'd be trading information back and forth and really working together, and no. We would check in occasionally and the like, but they're not only two different worlds, they're two different universes in many ways, and I think that continues to be the case.
The amount of time that it actually takes to be a legislator, not only when you're in session at the Capitol, but also campaigning, door knocking, lid dropping, parades. You never get away from it either. You will go up to a restaurant. I know the first time my wife and I went out for our anniversary after I was elected, we were sitting in a restaurant and a person came up and sat right down at the table with us, and we let them know we're here for our anniversary. Well, that's great. And then they explained everything that they wanted me to do, as a legislator, right? You can't get away from it. And now with social media, it makes it 100 times worse. You can never get away from it. And, there was one example where, again, like I said, we had young children, and our daughter was in 4th grade. She didn't quite understand why Dad wasn't coming home anymore, at night, right? As a rural legislator, you kiss your family goodbye either Sunday night or Monday morning, and you don't see them again until Friday, probably. And there was a couple times where, as soon as I was done with the committee, I jumped in my vehicle, I drove 2.5 hours back home, kissed my daughter goodnight, told her I loved her, and tucked her in, and then jumped back in the truck and headed back to the city. And so it's the amount of time. The other thing that really helped out, and I don't know if this is something that, I guess it goes with the question, is the staff is phenomenal. Thank goodness. When you're elected, the staff that we have and that we work with are absolutely phenomenal. They make us look good, right?
All right, so next question. I think there's a lot of, sort of mystery, maybe a little bit about the legislature and kind of what happens on the part of the general public, right? We're all so deep into it. And these folks in this room, obviously, with their engagement in this organization and others, they have a window and they see. But what is something that you wish that the general public understood about the legislature and the legislative process that you don't think they quite do?
The people that I serve with, whether they're Democrats or Republicans, are wonderful people. They're simply standing up for what they believe in. And, you hear about the fighting and the disagreements and throw all the bums out and whatever. But the truth of the matter is, it is a citizen legislature, and they're wonderful, wonderful people simply standing up for what they believe in. And I wish that everybody could get to know the legislators like we do. We disagree. We disagree on issues. But Jim, he represents a district that my son lives in, right? And so again, they're good people simply standing up for what they believe in.
Really what Rod just said. And I think the piece that's often misunderstood or misappreciated is the number of bills that pass with significant bipartisan support. The media attention goes to those fights we have. You miss, and your constituents and our constituents miss the amount of sometimes boring unanimity on a lot of bills.
Very well said. I couldn't agree more. I think every time I have a chance to speak at a county fair or to any group, and I always tell them we actually get along much better than is what is portrayed, and we actually get a lot done. And you always just want to focus on what wasn't done, but there is so much behind the scenes that is accomplished. And I also stress how important it is to have your voice, that your voice really makes a difference to us. We know about this much a mile wide, and that's why you guys come in and with your advice, expertise, information, and we really rely on that. And once in a while you'll dive deep into a subject area and you know it thoroughly, but if people knew how important their opinion was by email, a letter, a phone call, a visit. Henry Callis, who was before my time, but he told me right when I first got elected, and he was like a 35-year House member down there, he said, if I get 5 phone calls from my district, I'm like, what's going on? And if there's a dozen, then it's a pandemic. And it's kind of true, it hasn't really changed that much. If we hear from you, and you do have a voice, so I would absolutely say, get to know your legislators, your House and your Senate members, because you have a voice. If you keep informing us, we are going to listen. We should listen.
Well, I would really echo everything that has been said. I would make one point on the unanimity piece. Every session, I think, I've tried to make a practice of taking a picture of our special orders when we've passed all our bills, however many to 0 in that particular vote, and I tweet it out because I want to have the alternative position out there that sometimes it actually happens. The other thing, and I said this in my retirement speech, and I've said it a lot over the past 10 years, I do wish, because I think it's really unfortunate, just in general, there's a lot of, I think, public sentiment about people who work for our government. And I think that's unfair and unfortunate because I know we have a lot of great public servants who are working for our governments at all levels of government. And I absolutely believe, and I've worked in my private sector career with some amazing corporations and businesses, and I couldn't believe when I first came to the Minnesota Senate and saw it in the House as well and throughout, the level of talent and dedication and hard work that we see from our staff in the state government, and particularly speak for the Senate. The other thing I would say to people that I wish they could fully appreciate, and it's impossible because we can't read every single word of the HHS bills, but when you have a chance to have conversations with constituents about an issue that they care about, and they've heard this much about it, from Facebook or their neighbors or the news or whatever, and then you start talking about the issue and having had a chance to listen to different people discuss the ramifications of it and how it's going to affect different have different consequences for different people, different situations. They really, are like, oh wow, that's really good to know. I didn't understand that. I was aware of that. That's really great. And I just wish there was a way to let people really get into some of the nitty gritty that we have the privilege of being able to listen to in committee hearings, listening to constituents and other experts.
So I'm going to try to make up a question and write down this morning, so if it comes out a bit clunky, I apologize. But Rod's comments actually made me think of this and then the subsequent as well. So, we spent some time yesterday as a group talking about why the legislature failed this last session to pass major legislation, to pass a bonding bill. We talked about a number of different factors, including the increasing polarization in our culture just generally, and that sort of thing. And one of the things that we touched on just a smidge, we kind of glanced against it, but this discussion about the fact that you all from different parties and from different perspectives and from different geographies are able to work together is somewhat obscured. I wonder if you could maybe comment on, because I wonder if that obscurity of you as individuals and important issues on standing on their own is somewhat obscured by just the way that the legislative process works through each of the 4 caucuses, sort of acting as a team, maybe subsuming some of your personal thoughts on particular issues or nuances to what that team needs at that point. Talk about that dynamic as an individual at the legislature, but also playing a very team-oriented, team-discipline kind of sport. Does that make sense?
Yes.
I'll try. That was something that, and it's funny, I was speaking with somebody not just a week ago about who's running for office and trying to explain some of that, and that was an interesting conversation. Because for one thing, the word just like the word session has about 5 different meanings, the word caucus has about 5 different meanings, and so trying to get people to understand what that is its own thing. And I do firmly believe, and having had the privilege of being the leader of my caucus for 5 minutes, that our caucus, I think, is different than all the others. We're all unique, obviously, but there's something I think sort of, anyway, but I won't go into too much about that. But I think, there are different dynamics. But ultimately, and I ran into this a lot, I think from the outside, there's such a sense that it's all about ideology. That what drives a caucus is always about politics, and it's always about ideology, and it's always about messaging, or some version of that. And what I really see is that we've got 31 members now. If you've got 31 people who have managed to get themselves elected to office, they're to some degree smart, energetic, go get them, a lot of initiative, all that sort of stuff. When you get those 30 or 70 or however many people in one room, that's a thing. That is a situation. And right. And you're not, you cannot, there's no way you can get all those people to agree on everything all the time. And so it is very dynamic. It is very personal. And by that I mean about the individual, not about our personal feelings, but it has to do with our individual districts, the work we feel like we've been sent here to do, who we are, how we interact. There's so many different things, and so it's really hard to make big sweeping generalizations about it, other than to say it's just very fluid, I think. So yeah, that would, I guess, be my answer, my clunky answer to the question.
So, well, like I said, the legislators are wonderful people. The process stinks. And the reason, what has taken place is that with the omnibus bills, we will argue that there's actually in the Constitution a single subject. However, the way that we as the legislature get around that is it said if it's not in the title of the bill. And so now all of a sudden the titles of the bill are 6 pages long so that everything can be in an omnibus bill and still be, still uphold, what's in the Constitution. And what's taken place then, because of that process, and I was critical about it this year, the committee process is almost a waste of time anymore, because I was in an HHS, I was a conferee on an HHS committee. We were doing the side-by-sides. It was going along, I thought, it was going along well, and all of a sudden we just stopped. And the committee never met again. And then the leaders, they're the ones that decided what was going to be in that omnibus bill and bring it to the House and the Senate floor. It was disgusting. The process is broken. And since he said it publicly, I'm gonna call him out here. My dear friend, Representative Pat Garofalo. He'll more than likely win his election in the event the party that he serves is in the majority. He will be the chair of the Ways and Means Committee. And he said on the House floor, what's taking place with these omnibus bills are going to end. It will go back to a single subject, actual single subject. And as a constituent, not of his, but of the state, I'm going to hold him to that. The process is horrible. So, yeah, I guess that's where I'm going.
I'm going to avoid that last conversation. Because I think there's some I can agree on a lot of that. I think there's some downside if we put every single bill up to an individual vote, and what that does to the process, and what that does to voices that haven't traditionally been a part of the process.
At least keep it at agriculture. Fire.
Fair.
Bare minimum.
Fair. The little place, and I'll try to be brief since I've already spoken to this question, that I want to go to is the issue you're raising, Bradley, is a dimension of leadership. That when you've got, and Melissa Hortman, Speaker Hortman is very good at this, and I think it's key to her leadership. She's got 70 personalities that she has to deal with. And to Susan's point, we didn't get there without having a little bit of ego and a little bit of a strong personality and a little bit of those other dimensions that Susan mentioned. And then you've got to get us all, as a school of fish swimming in generally the same direction. And she has a tenderness, and I don't think this is isolated to members of our caucus, but I'll defer to you on that, Rod. But she has a tenderness with how she appreciates each and every legislator and what they need out of this session, or what they need as part of the dynamics of the session. She may not be able to get me what I most want, but she'll leave me with a sense that I was heard, I was given an opportunity, I was valued, I was appreciated, and I can take some of that home, which is what I need. And she's very good at that, and I think it's a key leadership skill. How do you work with the people you work with?
I love being last. That was a trick on my own. So I am a big fan of the speaker, and I worked with her very, very closely. I have been honored to chair finance for the last 6 years, and I see her style, and she does care deeply about each individual member. So sometimes when she gets hit upside the head by some of these members, it's hard to watch because she really does try. That being said, too, the leader of the Senate Republican Caucus is Jeremy Miller, and he's my best friend up there, and I sit with him again. We've sat together forever. He has a one-vote majority. One-vote majority. It's a divided government, one of the few in the nation. And it is, I think, very healthy to have a divided government in this nation. This balance. If it was all Republican, we'd have a whole nother set of issues that we'd be talking about up here. If it was all Democrat, a whole nother set of issues. So a divided government is good. It's healthy. And I think the conversation this year was complicated because of COVID, and we still weren't in the swing of being back, having those relationships, having these conversations. It's clunky doing a hearing through Zoom. It's very clunky. almost impossible to put a bill together through a Zoom meeting. It's not the best way to do it. But we survived, we're moving on. I guess, I feel like, yes, we need to have omnibus bills, otherwise we're never gonna get our work done. There's no way you're gonna let anybody off on a vote, and you have to have something to negotiate. When we were going into negotiations, it's 2 against 1, governor in the House, Democrat, and the Senate Republican. So it was 2 against 1 across those tables. You have to have something in an omnibus bill to trade. Otherwise, we're gonna get overruled every single time. And that's not fair too. So I do believe we need to keep these omnibus bills to the subject area, but you also have to put some stuff in there that's straight bait, and that's just plain negotiations.
All right. One of the things that I feel like I've noticed in my time there, so I've been lobbying since 2005, 2006, is, and it's a sense, but I think it's a widely shared sense, and you can certainly disagree with the premise of the question if you disagree, that the process feels like it is becoming less and less transparent. And I remember it was, I think, 2016 maybe, when Melissa Hortman first became speaker, or 2018, one of those years, and Gazelka, they said, we're going to be more transparent. Now, obviously, COVID and the exigencies around that and needing to do things over Zoom kind of did throw a wrench but into the whole thing. But my fear is that trend that we were on even before COVID and remote legislating now will be even more accelerated, because we've had that experience of being able to do it. And so talk a little bit about the transparency question, and am I right, is it less transparent than maybe it was 15 years ago? And is there any way to sort of pull the reins back and get us in a different direction?
Go ahead, you.
You came around.
You can't be the last on every question.
That's right. Absolutely, Bradley, you're spot on. It has definitely become less transparent, and that's maddening, because the public needs to have that engagement. They need to know what's going on. And then, of course, we had COVID, and I'm just going to be very open about this. I think our governor has gotten his influence into the process too early. It should be between the House and the Senate. Those two conferees, they have open hearings, they have open committee hearings, open conference committees, and everything is discussed, and then the governor should come in and weigh. But it has fallen where now it's just this three-way going on immediately, and a lot of it is being done behind closed doors. And I've been behind those closed doors. I know exactly what I'm talking about. And it's not very transparent. A lot of decisions are made, even sometimes without the caucus even being aware. And that was hard. That was very hard. It's been so accelerated and quick, and major decisions happening, and you try your very best to make sure everybody is comfortable and those issues are addressed. But it's tough, and I again think the governor has his place, but let us do our work first, and then you should come in. Governor. Like that.
So, yes, it is definitely less transparent even in the 10 years that I've been there. And, I remember very well conference committees where offers are made in open, and there's discussion, and then people go back and they talk about it, and then they come back and then there's another offer made in public. And we've completely lost that. I will push back on my friend and chair on the thing about the governor, because I well remember when Governor Dayton was in the office that we were still doing the same thing. And a big part of that problem, like I remember, I don't remember what year it was, I'd have to count on my fingers, but doing one of the budgets, and the Senate Republicans were, I think, newly in the majority, so this probably would have been, what was that, 17? And we did one whole round of omnibus bills that were never going to go anywhere, and it all took a lot of time. And then suddenly, we're got 5 minutes left, and we have to suddenly crank out a whole bunch of budgets. And then we got serious and started doing meaningful. So it was, those first bills were clearly veto bait. Obviously, they were veto bait, but we spent a lot of time on that, and then that slowed down the process. And which brings me to me what I think in my observation, and I'd be curious to know if anybody else sees this. One of the big problems we have in this, and it's not just the highly polarized legislature, it is our highly polarized public. It's the way our entire society has gotten. It completely disincentivizes any kind of compromise. Because if we are going to, on a timely basis, say 2 weeks before session is supposed to end, or a week even, if somebody compromises on something that people out there think is crossing a line, hell no, we can't go there, they've just sold us out, this is awful. The blowback is going to be terrible. It's going to last for a week or two or however long is in there. And nobody wants to deal with that. So it incentivizes everybody to wait till the end and hold all those decisions. Everybody knows where we're going, but everybody holds those decisions to the last minute. And it is not conducive to a healthy process, because compromise has become the dirty word, not just among us, but in the people that are most vocal in our emails and our phones and our town halls. So yes, and we could stand up to that. We as legislators and our leaders could stand up to that and say, nope, we're going to do what we need to do. We're going to go and talk to the people that we represent, and we're going to tell them why this is the best thing. I mean, look at this, bill that we think might pass out of Congress. We all know, everybody thinks that's a big compromise, but a lot of people are celebrating that that's actually happening. So we need to do more of that.
Transparency?
I don't know about
Whatever
that.
you want to take.
I think, the pandemic didn't help. If you can find something that the pandemic did help, please raise your hand and let me know. But I think what will be interesting to watch in this next session, if everything goes okay, is the natural tendency of legislators to want to mix it up, to want to be walking down the hallway and have those 10 conversations between here and the bathroom, to be engaging, to have constituent groups back in the state office building in our case, and bumping into people in the hallway and having those conversations. Because while there's a tendency on the part of leadership, regardless of who the leadership is, to want to pull it back and pull it behind closed doors and hold on to as much authority and power as they can, there's a bit of a countervailing tendency for the process, if fully engaged, to push back against that.
You're right. The process makes it to where there's very little transparency. And let's go back to the omnibus bills. It's not simply an omnibus bill, it's an omnibus bill. For instance, instead of having just a bill that's agriculture related, you'll have agriculture, jobs, environment, transportation, whatever, all in the same bill. And what happens is it'll go into a room where you have maybe 4 people in that room. They will determine what's going to be in that bill, then they bring it back out to us and say vote for it or against it. The process stinks. Or you will have, like I said, this multi-omnibus bill to where if you're a chair on a committee, you can't even serve on that conference committee because there's too many chairs, because there's too many bills, so you don't even have a voice on that. And again, the process, what has taken place with just the control of a handful of people writing these bills and bringing it back to the caucus and say support it or oppose it is absolutely wrong. And it's going to take the individual legislators to say enough is enough. We're going to follow this process. We're going to have the people involved. We're going to put our omnibus bill together if we're going to have it for HHS or whatever. And that is going to be the bill that we're going to be working on, because that's the bill that we sent to the Senate, or the bill the Senate sent to us. And whatever's in that bill will be what's going to be in that final bill that the public had input on to bring back to the legislature to vote up or vote down. But what's taking place right now is taking everybody else out of the process, and I think it's grotesque.
Yeah, there does become a point in session where I'll joke, and I think this is largely true of the majority of legislators, because you're not necessarily in those rooms or on those conference committees or a chair of a committee, where essentially we just become well-dressed hostages, right? We're just sort of waiting, and it's, you know, and we were waiting to see what our fate or the fate of an issue might be. But yeah, it is vexing. It is interesting because I remember, and you know, I especially remember Representative Dabney, you know, back when you were chair of the Property Tax Division. I mean, that the tax conference committee was a real thing, right? I mean, it was meeting, and there was actual like testimony from people, and there were offers made back and forth. And now, granted, Tom Bach and Ann Linchesky maybe made a little bit of a show of it, but it was still in public, right? And there was still actual substance of some sort that was being done and being discussed in public, and that just is largely not there in almost any issue. I mean, it's, you do the walkthrough, you might have some people make some comments, and then, like you said, everybody kind of disappears for a couple of days, and then a bill materializes, and that is what it is. So,
Right.
yeah, and I do think, I mean, because to what the answer is, I'm not sure what it is other than what Representative Hamilton said, in that it needs to be the individual legislator sort of asserting themselves into this.
That's what it's.
But again, you know, as was discussed, there's a dynamics of a caucus of 32 people or 71 people that you're all still also have to go in the same direction. So it's a complicated puzzle. If we could, I might want to see if there are any questions from the group. And we've got one from the city of Worthington, Chad Cummings. I'm going to run over here. Like, which one was the guy that got hit by the chair? It wasn't Maury Povich, it was the other one, right? One of those talk show hosts got a chair in the face.
Steve is his bouncer.
All right. So, here we go.
That was Geraldo Rivera.
This comes as no surprise to Rod because he knows me well. When does the BS end? When does the party crap end? And when do you become the voice of the people who you represent instead of the ego? And I'm not pointing fingers at you, that you all know that you are in a room because you said that's what it takes, and I understand and I believe that. I feel very fortunate, and this isn't to toot Rod's horn, that I was represented by a unicorn, not a bull. Rod Hamilton stuck his neck out, got reprimanded by his party, got his seniority taken away in conference committees and things like that because he bucked the system for the people against his party. When do we see that anymore? When are we going to get away from the egos and actually speak the voice of the people you represent, not the party you belong to?
Want the unicorn?
I'll do you a favor. I'll start. I think underlying your question is the challenge of the partisanship that is across our society. I will tell you that I sincerely believe that I have worked the last 22 years in service of my community. And at times that has meant differing with my leadership. But there is not a way that you could create a legislative district that included a meaningful percentage of my existing district and made it a competitive partisan district. You just, it would, you know, we're an inch deep and a mile wide. It would be 2 blocks wide and 10 miles long in order to get it. It would make no sense whatsoever. So I think I have done exactly what you asked us to do. I doubt that any of us up here are going to say, "Oh no, I'm just a party guy." Or
That
gal.
wasn't generalized to you.
No, understood. No offense taken. But the book I consistently recommend is I think it's a 2008, and it's called The Big Sort. And what it talks about is, yeah, there's problems in other states with gerrymandering. I do not believe that gerrymandering is an issue here. But the problem is the folks who live in my district. I'm not going to ask Rod how his son votes now that I represent him.
If he went to the U, he's a damn liberal.
See? And we have a phenomena of good suburban Republicans downsizing and moving into the city and becoming good urban Democrats. And so there's this sorting thing that we do. I'll be hitting him up for a bonsai.
So I think I'm the unicorn that Chad was talking about. But you know, there is a lot of pressure. There is a lot of pressure coming from your party at times to vote a certain way. One of the things that I did pride myself on is I worked closely with people back home. And I can give you a specific example. We worked strong together for Highway 60, the completion of Highway 60. In 2008, I voted to override the transportation, Palente's veto of the transportation bill. I did have the state party come out and try to throw me out. They actually came to one of our Republican caucus meetings back in Cottonwood County, trying to get me thrown out. And the people stood behind me. They said, "You're representing us, and he's our guy," and they stood behind me. And I went, after that vote, I went from barely winning the election, 51%, to over 60% after the people recognized that I stood up for them, right? There were times when I was, my party was all green, for instance, and I was red, and the speaker held the board open, and the majority leader went up there, and they talked, and then the majority leader came walking up to me and said, "I'm supposed to ask you to change your vote." And I said, "Well, you know the answer to that." And she said, "Yes, I knew that before I came here, but I had to ask you." No, you have to be able to, whoever runs for office, and you know, if you're serving your people, make sure that you do just that. Know who sent you out there, and even if it goes against your party, have the strength and courage to go against your party to, again, represent the people that sent you there.
Well, Rod is my hero. In 2008, it was like, that was really fun. It was fascinating. It was just fascinating, and it's so important to remember that you do have to represent your people. When I took over, Tracy Beckman was there, 28-year Democrat, so the district was Democrat and then it switched a couple years, and then I took over, and I've had it for 20 years. You have to represent your people. You have to explain to your caucus that yes, this might be a vote that you need, but it's very important. If it's against ag, if it's something that you absolutely can't do, it's your job to get that message across. I know back in 2005, I was the chief author of this big meth bill, and Dick Day asked me to vote against the Health and Human Services bill where it was in as a statement. And I remember going back and just crying and crying, voting against the very bill that Senator Berglund got in there for me, helped me with. And it all turned out, it passed, but those were the sacrifices that I will never forget. And if you don't think this job is humbling, it is humbling every single day. You are humbled by not only the magnitude of what you can accomplish, but the mistakes, what you don't know, the anger, but there's so much it offers also. So it's a great balance, but believe me, it is very, very humbling, this job.
Yeah, I don't know that I have a whole lot to add, and my district started out as a very swing district. In fact, my seat had flipped many times, and then I was the first one reelected for 20 years. And it has changed because it's the sorting. The young families are still moving out to the suburbs because they want bigger houses, or the schools or whatever. And with that, the politics have changed, and that's not unique to Minnesota. And it is something that is happening across our country. And there are a lot of we could be here forever talking about that. But ultimately, I agree. I mean, I think that most of us do our best to represent the interests of the people that we are there to serve with all sincerity. And sometimes, it's not just voting straight up or down on something because of omnibus bills, or because if you take a stand in this one, it's potentially going to influence the outcome in your direction, and so you're playing a longer game kind of a thing. And you know, those are hard decisions, because wouldn't we love every single vote to get up and vote our consciences? But we know that, you know, this vote this week isn't the final outcome. You know, we know this story is going to play out. So it's, you know, it is complicated and hard, and that sounds like a lame excuse. I get it.
So question for you guys, do you think that you make your districts more safe, Democrat or Republican, by the way you serve them? Well, more politically safe, so you do become reelected. And
when I was elected, my district really was split like right down the middle. And so my first term, which was when we were in the majority, right? So when your actions actually have more impact than when you're in the minority. And I remember saying, every time I cast a vote, I'm pissing off half my district. I just need to be sure it's not always the same half. And I was very sincere about that, you know. But I don't think in my case necessarily I influenced, you know, what I did made the district more safe. It really is demographics and the way that that community has evolved over these 10 years. You know, I am very clear. I mean, I remember I would look at my Minneapolis colleagues and it's like, they never have to think for a second about how they're going to vote on anything. You know, they know exactly how they're going to vote. I had to think about every single vote hard, you know, and because it was, I was trying in good faith, because I took that commitment I made to my communities very seriously, to do what I felt was the right thing.
Do either of the other two of you have a thought on Senator Rosen's question, or Senator Rosen, do you have a thought on your own question?
no, I think your representation can affect your district and maneuver it. If I was terrible, they would have had, the Democrat would have had a chance to get in there. I'm not a Democrat, somebody who votes for the district, and they would have been there. And that could have influenced.
Can I ask a question about that? I mean, just so we talked yesterday about how over time the margin of victory in legislative races has gotten wider and wider and wider in the early 2000s, and I attributed this largely to just the lopsidedness of Minneapolis and St. Paul. The average margin of victory was about 21%. Now the average margin of victory in legislative elections is something, you know, we're closing the 30s, the low 30s. And so I think my question is, do you think that the statement that you made about that you can impact and sort of influence the direction of your district, do you think that that is still true? Or is it more or less true than maybe it would have been 10 years ago?
There you go. That's the question.
Okay, there you go. All right. Rod, why don't you opine?
So, well, I'll just, for the first time I ran back in 2004, so I ran on the Republican ticket. My senator at the time was Senator Vickerman, who was a Democrat. And I barely won the district. I was behind all night, and then the town that I live in, I received 750 out of 900 votes, and it pushed me up over the top, and I won by 200 votes, I think. Nobody else knew who I was, so thank goodness they did. And so I won. I barely won. And then I had the 2008, and that put me up over 60% then. And the last election I ran, I had 73% of the votes. And my senator, who's a Republican now, when he first ran, the very first time he ran, he lost the side of the district that I serve. I serve the community of Worthington, and so it's not a slam dunk like Senator Rosen was saying. It's not a slam dunk area. So I think, like Julie was saying, if you represent your people, represent them well, I think you can move that.
I got nothing.
Fair enough. So we're rounding into the end of our hour here, and I wanted to close it with this question. And part of it is based on my own personal experience. I think one of the cool parts about my job is that I get to travel all over the state. I get to see amazing places. I get to learn about things that I never knew existed. I think anybody who went on that Red Wing boot tour this morning could say that. See institutions that are doing good work and amazing work, and it is tremendously fulfilling because we live in an amazing place. All right, I am a Minnesota exceptionalist. I will say that we are better than everyone, hands down, all the time. So obviously, you get to have a similar experience as a legislator. You get to travel around. You get to learn about things that you would not have otherwise experienced as a legislator, or as not a regular person, a non-legislator. And so what is one thing that in the course of your service that you, or place that you've been, or institution that you got to learn about, or business that is doing a cool thing that you had no idea about? What's one thing that when you saw that, you almost literally said, holy cow, that's the coolest thing I've ever seen. I had no idea that existed, based on your service?
So I touched a little bit on this in some previous public stuff, but the opportunity to get some direct experience with racial, cultural, and ethnic groups other than my own. Having Jamie Becker-Finn, who's an Ojibwe woman from Legislator, represents the suburbs now but grew up in Cass Lake, take some of us out wild ricing. And when she praised me for how I was able to pull a canoe, that was like, I'm taking this. That can show up on my gravestone. Well, not when you're wild ricing. Yes, I'd always been told, don't stand up in a canoe. But here I was. Going to Fuli's father's traditional Hmong funeral was an amazing experience. Some of those pieces, going to iftars, going to the meal at the end, breaking the fast during the Muslim holy month of Ramadan. These are things that, absent service in the legislature, I would have much less access to. And I think it provided me different sorts of insight into those communities in our state, and also opportunity for me to grow and experience that as a person.
Julie wants to go last again.
I was going to say.
She's good.
Well, here, I'll just hand this to Rob right now.
I would say, I mean, and listening to all of these, there's so many you can't pick. I mean, it is such an incredibly rich experience that I will be forever grateful for. And, you know, things that popped into my brain are, when we were in the majority, I was vice chair of the transportation committee, getting to go do field hearings in different parts of the state and listening to the challenges of, you know, the people working for the counties and the local communities and the local businesses. That was amazing. One that really sticks in my head was the governor's fishing opener outside of Wilmer. I mean, that was just it was a wonderful experience, and you know, it gave me a moment to appreciate that community in a way that I would not have otherwise. But I will say that the thing, and you know, this is going to kind of go on a different level. The one thing that I think hit me most profoundly, and Jim, you may know this too, within our education system, and particularly in the metro with our intermediate school districts, we have schools that are dedicated to our highest needs, special needs kids. And they are doing the Lord's work with these kids who have needs that none of us can imagine. And that there are so many kids that need those services is heartbreaking and sobering, and a reminder that the work is nowhere near done. But it is seeing Minnesotans and the lives they're living, and remembering why we're doing this work.
Ooh, definitely want to go last on that. It's so wonderful to serve with Senator Kent on the committees, because she does very heartfelt work. So thank you for that. it's interesting when you're at the Capitol, because your world is actually very small, and you start to spin on yourself a little bit, and then you go home on the weekend, and you go to the cafe, or you go and roll die with the guys at the cafe, or you go out and you're talking around, and you go, oh yeah, now I know why I ran for this job, because I really like these people, and this is really important, and I can make a difference. And that has served me for the last 20 years, because it is truly a sacrifice, what we've done to our families, no matter if you're 4 miles from the Capitol, or as Rod and I are, a long way from the Capitol. After my first year, I realized it was called Baker's Dozen. There was a whole bunch of us, and I loved Dick Day, and he got all these 13 new freshmen. And after that first year, I'm like, these people don't understand ag at all. So I got a field trip planned, and we had a bus, and Lori Sturdivant from the Star Tribune was on, and we came on down to Fairmont, and the morning was the school administrator and the city administrator, and we had a great open forum. And then I took them to a hog setup. Gene Hugeson, who used to be the commissioner of ag, his setup. Well, I didn't know it was shower in, shower out. So, yeah, it was pretty funny. So you're showering with all these senators and this Star Tribune reporter, and it was hilarious. No blow dryer, no towels. It was hilarious. But they walked away and they said, ag is big business. This is big business. I'm like, right. So those little field trips that we have a chance to engage in are so important. Lori Sturdivant wrote an excellent editorial about the field trip, and I wish we could do more of that, because to see the entire state in that whatever aspect it is tremendous. Two things that stick out in my mind besides the ag piece is the Mayo Clinic, and to see behind the scenes there. I've served on Health and Human Services for the whole time, and we are such a leader with the University of Minnesota and the Mayo and all the other ancillary network and businesses around that. And then I just want to shout out the Viking Stadium, and working with Governor Dayton and Lori Lanning, the House member, to get that, and all the people that supported that. That was a tough pull, but to see all the workings behind the scene to get that bill done and to be a part of that was a tremendous honor.
So I can take this opportunity to list all the cool things in District 22B to get you to come down and visit the city of Worthington and others. But I would say for myself, there's a couple things that are really cool in St. Paul that I got to become familiar with. One, I became very good friends with a gentleman named Tua Zhang. He owns Mungtown Marketplace right on Como. Tua and his wife Nu are just wonderful people, and that market that they have with all the fresh fruits and vegetables and everything is really cool, just how they have that set up. It's different from anything that I've seen. And then working with the Hmong farmers, they have a plot of ground. It would be south of Coates. Is that 52, Highway 52 that runs? That is really cool. You should go see that as well. That's really neat, and I enjoy the agriculture piece. In the district that I serve, what people don't realize, if you would go through the school system, you go through the school in Worthington, over 80% of the students are students of color. And you wouldn't realize that really, or I didn't know that prior to. But just getting exposed to things like that, it's incredible. So this state has so much to offer. It's just a wonderful, wonderful, beautiful state, and it's been an honor to serve the people.
Well, all well said. And I, yesterday, I will admit that there was maybe a fair amount of cynicism about the legislature and in the frame of the 2022 session. But I think that it's also important to hear from you all as you are exiting the scene to talk about how it really works at a visceral level, at an individual level, and how that plugs into then the caucus that you're a part of and the constituents that you serve. And I think we got a really good sense of that, and the values that these folks, and I think their colleagues, are carrying to the Capitol. And so I really appreciate your being here this afternoon. I think this was a really fun conversation. I had high expectations. You absolutely met them, and so I couldn't be more pleased. And so hopefully you got a sense, and hopefully you'll get a chance to talk to them here a little bit afterwards about what truly great public servants they are, how interested they are in everything that is going on in various corners of the state, because they truly are. And I think that's the thing that I hope that we look for in legislators is curiosity. I think that is a thing that if a person has curiosity, they will make a good legislator, and that's definitely something that these folks have in spades. So before I ask for a round of applause for you, I want to give just a brief housekeeping. So cocktails upstairs before dinner at 5. Dinner is at 6.
It's on the 5th floor.
And it's on the 5th floor. It's up in the summit room, which makes sense because it is the tallest part of the building. So that is the next stop. But please do take a moment to thank our panelists for being here. We really appreciate it. We're going to miss you in the